Archaeologists have the power to redefine history. Just one crazy find, and everything we thought we knew can be thrown into the trash. But some discoveries are a lot more jaw-dropping than others. From a strange 700-year-old box to a subterranean world no one knew existed, it's time to dust your trowels off, because today we're looking at some of the most mysterious and shocking underground discoveries ever made. The Buried Box. Back in 2011, road workers in eastern China's Jiangsu province were digging up a road to carry out renovation work when their shovels suddenly hit something hard. Confused, they dug around some more and uncovered a large stone box hidden a few feet beneath the surface. Unsure of what they were looking at, the workers quickly called in experts to investigate the strange box further. The archaeologist arrived on the scene, lifted the box from its earthy slumber, and cracked open the lid. At first, there didn't seem to be much in there aside for some old wet linen. But when they peeled back the layers, they were shocked at what they found underneath. A mummified body stared straight back up at them. And it was so well preserved, you could even make out its eyebrows. Jeez, I'd be straight out of there before the curse kicked in. A suspicious brown liquid also surrounded the mummy, submerging parts of its body and completely soaking the fabric. Yum. Fortunately, it was just muddy water, but believe it or not, this water was responsible for the mummy's incredible condition. It had abnormally low levels of oxygen in it, meaning bacteria couldn't grow, which slowed down the body's decomposition. Because of this, the mummy was recognizably female, with most of her features intact. Even more impressively, after excavating the site, archaeologists reckon the tomb was some 700 years old, meaning the woman was alive during the Ming Dynasty era. She must have been a classy lady too, because she had a glamorous jade ring on one finger and had been buried with over 20 other items. What's more, only high-ranking members of the dynasty would have been wrapped in so much linen, as it was an expensive commodity. Though historians can't actually agree on whether she was mummified intentionally or not. Either way, I think I need to get myself some deoxygenated mud water. It must do wonders for the skin. Oddball. Usually I don't believe in conspiracy theories, but one super strange discovery from back in 1974 made me question, well, pretty much everything. It all started when a large fire ripped through some woodlands belonging to the Burt's family in Jacksonville, USA. After the fire eventually subsided, the Bettses tentatively went into the woods to examine the damage. Only whilst they were there, they stumbled across something far more mysterious than the burnt trees. A strange silver ball, completely smooth aside from a triangular symbol stamped onto its surface, lay poking from the ground. It was around 8 inches wide, making it slightly larger than a bowling ball. Initially believing it could be an old cannonball from the Spanish colonial period, the family took the ball home with them. However, they soon realized cannonballs from that time would have been made out of iron or stone, not stainless steel or silver plate. Plus, the sphere was completely untarnished and free of corrosion, so it can't have been very old. But if you think that's weird, you ain't heard nothing yet. After taking the ball home, it suddenly started rolling around by itself and vibrating. Scared and totally bamboozled, the family went to the media to share the unexplainable discovery. A media frenzy ensued, and respected newspapers like the New York Times and the London Daily sent reporters to witness this seemingly supernatural ball. And its antics weren't a one-off. The orb continued to perform its inexplicable act over and over again. Amongst other things, if it was pushed across the floor, it'd roll one way, then suddenly change direction before returning to its starting position. Okay, so what the heck was going on? Well, at the time, nobody had a clue. But more recently, it's suspected the sphere was just part of some lost machinery, and its erratic movements were down to the Betts' house uneven floors. I'm not convinced. What do you reckon? Let me know down in the comments below. Mystery Monster. Sometimes someone digs something up that's so perplexing, it has archaeologists, scientists, and historians all scratching their heads for decades. This unassuming lump of rock found in Mason Creek, Illinois in the 1950s is just such a head-scratcher. I know it doesn't look like much, but what if I told you this isn't a piece of rock at all, but the 300-million-year-old fossil of a terrifying beast known only as the Tully Monster? Seriously, it is. Since it was first discovered, scientists studying the fossil have come up with a rough idea of what the long-extinct sea creature would have looked like, and it's frighteningly freaky. With strange stalked eyes and a long trunk-like appendage ending in a pair of razor-sharp jaws, it's safe to say I'm not too bothered it's extinct. Despite a ton more fossils being unearthed though, the creepy creature is still shrouded in mystery. We're not even sure if it had a backbone or not. But on the off chance that this thing isn't actually extinct, remind me never to go for a dip in Mason Creek. Forbidden Forest. If someone says black hole, I immediately think of those gravity-sucking nightmares in outer space. But a black hole was recently discovered right here on Earth, in China. Okay, so it's not the same kind of black hole, but it's just as mysterious. The hole, found in Lehigh County in 2022, serves as the entrance to an entire underground world. Honestly, cave explorers initially found the dizzying 600-foot deep chasm before alerting scientists of their discovery. The scientists then trekked for hours to reach the bottom of the strange hole so that they could explore what lay inside. And when they finally reached their destination, they found something truly remarkable. A rich subterranean forest was growing at the bottom. The trees towered up to 130 feet, and the dense undergrowth reached all the way to the scientists' shoulders. 3 large caves also lay within the deep hole, harboring who knows what kind of secrets. Because of how untouched the surreal place is, there could even be entirely new, undiscovered species hiding amongst the foliage. The void didn't just randomly appear though. It's actually a sinkhole, and they're found all over China. Sinkholes are created when rainfall seeps into cracks and crevices in rocks. Over time, the water builds up and dissolves the rock, creating underground tunnels which widen until they eventually collapse in on themselves. The resulting chasm is called a sinkhole. Typically, a sinkhole wouldn't let in enough light for large trees to grow, but this hole's unique shape lets enough in for them to flourish. Because of this, all manner of life could be milling around down there. Who knows, there could even be something freakier than the Tully Monster. Skeleton ships. Every day, thousands of people walk the streets of San Francisco, completely unaware of the rich and mysterious history hidden just below their feet. I don't mean that metaphorically either. In 2001, a 150-year-old ship was unearthed from directly beneath the city. And it's not the only one. Between 30 and 60 19th century sailing ships are still buried beneath the city's Embarcadero and financial districts. So how the heck did a boatload of boats end up under there? Well, in 1849, gold was discovered in California. Eager and excited to make their fortune, thousands of people sailed to the U.S. state with the shiny stuff on their mind and anchored their ships on the shores of San Francisco. Most of these ships never set sail again because their crew abandoned them in pursuit of treasure, which is exactly what happened to the General Harrison, the ship uncovered in 2001. Like many other abandoned ships, the Harrison wasn't just left to rot, but instead converted into a floating warehouse. Sadly, however, it had just a year of use before a dreadful fire tore through the city in 1851, engulfing entire streets and destroying the Harrison along with a load of other ships. Before rebuilding their city, San Franciscans took sand from the surrounding hills and used it to cover over the burnt areas, burying the ships as they did so. Today, many of those ships still remain, hidden just out of sight, strange skeletal shadows of their former selves. So you might not be able to see it, but those gold hunters sure left a legacy. Central Park Secrets. When you think of New York City, Central Park is one of the first things that springs to mind. But as familiar as the park is now, it used to be very different. In fact, it wasn't a park at all. It was once a close-knit community of 1,600 people called Seneca Village. Historians had known about the village since its inception, but never made any attempt to excavate the site. But in 2011, all that changed when they headed to Central Park to begin a monumental dig. What they uncovered was wild. Not hundreds, but thousands of 150-year-old artifacts were buried beneath the famous park, ranging from a child's shoe to a ceramic teapot. So who were the people that lived here? And how did a once thriving village come to vanish off the face of the earth? Well, the village was founded in 1825 by middle-class African-American New Yorkers. These guys had had enough of the overcrowded racist climate of Lower Manhattan, so they'd migrated towards Upper West Side. Here they bought up what would later become Central Park's western edge and established a community there, complete with housing, churches, and even a school. For 20 years the village prospered. However, while Seneca flourished, white New Yorkers stuck in Lower Manhattan got jealous. They wanted a nicer place to live too. So the wealthiest of them began migrating over to the Upper West Side, right by Seneca Village. But that wasn't enough. They also wanted more outdoor space. Before long, real estate developers began looking to turn Seneca Village into parklands, and in 1857, they got their wish. Despite passionate protesting, the residents of the village were harshly kicked from their land. And to add salt to the wound, most weren't even paid for it. Time passed, and by the 1870s, the village was all but forgotten, with the brand new Central Park gleaming in its stead. Sadly, all evidence of Seneca was buried. Until 2011, that is. Now, if you ever find yourself walking across western Central Park, just think, you're walking on top of a lost civilization. Okay, it doesn't quite look like that, but you get the idea. A humongous hoard. Ever dreamt of winning the lottery? I know I have. But back in 1992, one super lucky man called Eric Laws from the small town of Hoxton, England, stumbled across something even better than a lottery win. And he wasn't dreaming. After promising to help his neighbor find his lost hammer, Eric took out his metal detector and began roaming the fields near his house. Before long, he started picking up a mega strong signal. At first, he assumed he'd found the hammer, but after rooting around in the soil, what he actually ended up unearthing was a coin. Although oddly, it wasn't a British pound. Oh no, it was dated all the way back to 450 AD. Hard pounding in his chest, Eric started digging and soon found another and another. Before long, he dug up all kinds of valuable looking coins, utensils, and jewelry. At this point, Eric knew he'd discovered something massive. In total, there turned out to be a hefty 60 pounds in weight of gold and silver artifacts dating back to the end of the Roman Empire. In fact, it remains the largest hoard of treasure ever discovered in the UK. As to its origins, the coins gave the biggest clue. During 450 AD, when they were dated, foreign invaders were threatening to conquer Roman land in Europe. In response, Romano-British people began burying their most precious possessions to keep them safe from the invading forces. However, many of the owners fled and never returned to reclaim their belongings. Instead, the treasures lay hidden for over a millennium. And who knows how many more of these forgotten treasure troves lie beneath British soil. Eric's stash was worth more than a staggering $4 million, which makes me think I really need to buy a metal detector and catch a flight. Talk about striking gold. Whopping wombats. Would you prefer to fight one rhino-sized wombat or 100 wombat-sized rhinos? This might seem like a silly question, because it is, but giant wombats really used to exist, and they were as terrifying as they sound. Back in 2012, scientists in Queensland, Australia discovered a graveyard of not one, not two, but 50 of the giant beasts. Thank God zombies aren't real, because if they were, those scientists would have had a lot on their hands. Formerly known as a diprotodon, the huge wombats stood almost 7 feet tall and weighed a whopping 3 tons. What's more, the pouches on their bellies were big enough to hold an entire human. So even though these guys ate plants, I'm pretty glad they went extinct some 50,000 years ago. Sorry, fellas. But why were so many fossils found in one spot? Well, researchers believe they got trapped in some kind of bog. It's possible that a drought forced them to leave their normal environment and go searching for water, which they likely found. However, unfortunately for the diprotodon, the water dried up while they stood in it, and the poor guys got stuck in the resulting mud. Even worse, the researchers found crocodile and lizard teeth within their skeletons, meaning the animals probably also ended up as a reptilian lunch. Yikes. Next time you think you're having a bad day, spare a thought for the Diprododon. You definitely won't have a bad day though if you hit those like and subscribe buttons. That way you'll never miss any of my new amazing content again. All done? Alright, onwards. Unbelievable. Imagine finding something so rare and mysterious that people refuse to believe you when you try to tell them. Well, that's exactly what happened to Larry and Cheryl Lozier, a couple from Hyde Park, New York in the summer of 1999. Larry had decided it was time to give the pond in the backyard a bit of a revamp. But as he was digging, he hit a huge, almost 3-foot-long bone. Stumped but convinced it was something significant, he started contacting local colleges in the hope that they'd be able to debunk the mystery. Yet no matter who he rang, nobody would spare him the time to check it out. Eventually, after days of fruitless calling, he got hold of an archaeologist who did find the story interesting. They came over to investigate, and sure enough confirmed something extraordinary. Larry had stumbled across the leg bone of a huge extinct mammal called a mastodon. So Larry's plans for a new pond went swiftly out the window, and a team of archaeologists arrived on the scene to begin digging for more of the skeleton. They eventually found another bone, and following that, over 90 others, including a pair of colossal tusks. Most impressively of all, though, was the huge skull, which was in surprisingly immaculate condition. A species of ancient elephant, mastodons stood over 10 feet tall and could weigh up to 11 tons, making them almost twice the weight of our heaviest modern elephants. And considering they went extinct over 10,000 years ago, the incredibly preserved skeleton was a monumental archaeological find. The full skeleton was pieced together and now stands tall in all its glory at New York's Museum of the Earth. So you know where to go if you want to see it. Just make sure you pack your trunk. Subterranean springs. Historians are a notoriously brainy bunch, but even they were utterly stumped at one discovery made in Boesland, Denmark in 2015. After catching wind that some prehistoric artifacts had been found in the area, a group of archaeologists began excavating further. In a perplexing twist, however, they didn't find coins or jewelry. No, instead, they uncovered an assortment of strange gold springs, unlike anything they'd seen before. Were the springs mechanical components for some ancient piece of technology? Confused, they continued to dig, but after digging up over 2,000 of these little treasures, they were no closer to knowing what they were. Eventually though, after much analysis, they came up with a pretty wacky theory. The springs were buried during the Bronze Age, a time when Boesland was considered a sacred place by locals. So archaeologists reckon the mysterious springs could have been part of a religious costume worn by a sort of priest king. No, this isn't taken straight out of Game of Thrones. Apparently, the priest king could have worn the outfit as a way to honor the sun, which ancient people saw as sacred because the springs would have shimmered majestically in the sunlight. As to how they ended up underground, well, it's possible they were removed and buried as part of a religious ritual. But whilst this may be true, no one knows for sure what their real purpose was. What do you think? An alternative theory doesn't exactly spring to mind. Ice Age idols. Fashions famously come and go, meaning today's coolest look could be tomorrow's unforgivable faux pas. So it's not surprising that women in the Ice Age followed very different fashion trends to the ones of today. Nothing depicts this better than the Venus figurines, an assortment of 200 statuettes that have been discovered all across Europe and even as far east as Siberia. These ancient models, carved from materials such as ivory and clay, are all based off of the female form. So far, so normal, right? However, it's believed that the statuettes were emblems of fertility and beauty, despite depicting their subjects in various stages of obesity. Now, I'm not condemning a larger body shape. I myself have eaten a few too many donuts to judge anybody else. However, the models suggest that women living through this period were actively encouraged to pile on the pounds. So what gives? Well, people living in the Ice Age some 14,000 to 38,000 years ago had to contend with one of the most grueling climates in human history. Every day, humans faced advancing glaciers and brutal temperature drops, which put them in constant danger of succumbing to hypothermia. So in order to keep as warm as possible and avoid this, societies placed great emphasis on having more body fat. Indeed, the larger the woman, the more likely she'd survive an ordeal such as childbirth, and the more desirable she became. Man, I wish my excuse was living through an ice age. Vampiric victims. Looking for your next holiday destination? Forget Disneyland. Why not take a trip to Bulgaria? It's got grand cathedrals, beautiful landscapes, and vampire funeral sites. Yep, you heard that correctly. Across Bulgaria, the graves of over 100 real-life vampires have been unearthed from the ground. Right. Okay, I know what you're thinking. How do we know these skeletons are vampire skeletons? Well, they've all got one thing in common. A stake right through the heart. Phew, now their evil souls can never rise again. Alright, I'll stop messing with you. They weren't actually vampires, at least not to our knowledge anyway, but in medieval Bulgaria, superstitions were rife, and the fear of the legendary bloodsuckers was very real. The fact that so many of these strange stake skeletons have been uncovered doesn't so much prove the existence of vampires, but rather how paranoid people were of them. Many medieval Europeans believed that if someone had been bad during their lifetime, they might turn into a vampire after death. Therefore, to stop this, their bodies were stabbed through the chest with an iron or wooden rod before they were buried. Even today, some Eastern Europeans from remote villages still keep garlic and crucifixes on hand, just in case. So to any vampires watching, I'd stay away from those guys, or you could find yourself in a grave situation. In a pickle. If you're watching this video, you probably think archaeology is at least kinda cool. I mean, who wouldn't want to be a real-life Indiana Jones? But it's not all about finding gold and running from booby traps. Sometimes you might stumble across something a little less glamorous. Like, I don't know, a 2,500-year-old pickled brain? Yep, in 2008, archaeologists discovered just such a brain in a waterlogged pit in England. Though rather than a nice handy jar, it had been pickled right inside its owner's skull. Ew. Typically, when a person dies, the brain starts to break down in mere minutes, and as it's made up of 80% water, it completely vaporizes within a decade. So how did this brain stay preserved for an astounding 250 times longer? To find out, experts got to work analyzing both the brain and surrounding skull. The brain hadn't been tampered with by any kind of chemicals, so they quickly ruled that out. When looking at the skull, however, they noticed a series of fractures, which revealed that the head had actually been decapitated before being tossed in the pit. Just when you thought this couldn't get any grimmer, eh? Whoever it belonged to then was probably executed. The execution itself didn't contribute much to the brain's incredible preservation, but its burial probably did. You see, when brain tissue is subjected to air, it tends to decay very quickly. However, in a pure fluke, the brain was tossed into the watery pit and became rapidly buried in thick clay, which was very low in oxygen. This created the perfect conditions for preservation, as microbes were unable to grow and devour the brain. What's more, brain tissue is preserved much better in wet environments due to being mostly water itself. So our old noggin was able to stand the test of time. People say not to bury your head in the sand, but burying your head in wet soil may have some unexpected benefits. Alright, that's about all we have time for today, folks. Which one of those mysterious finds made your jaw drop the most? Let me know down in the comments, and thanks for watching.